A single vote decided the fate of 100 million people. Not a war. Not a king's decree. A vote cast by a room of merchants in London, men who sold silk and spices for a living, arguing over shipping costs and shareholder dividends. One of the men in that room controlled more soldiers than the King of England. He wasn't a general. Wasn't royalty. He was a businessman. And by the time the East India Company was done, a trading firm founded to buy pepper had become the private government of an entire subcontinent. Stick with me, this will make sense, but only if we go back to the very unglamorous beginning. A group of frustrated London traders locked out of the world's best trade deals. Here's the world in 1600. Spices run the global economy. Pepper, cinnamon, nutmeg, these aren't just seasonings, they're currency. Fortunes. The Portuguese and the Dutch already have the good routes locked down. England is late. England is annoyed. So a group of London merchants do what merchants do, they petition the crown for a monopoly. Queen Elizabeth I signs a charter. Boom, the East India Company is born, with the exclusive right to trade with Asia. Picture the first meeting. A cramped room, tobacco smoke, men hunched over maps of coastlines they've never seen. We're not asking for land, one investor says, tapping the map. Just a foothold. A warehouse. Somewhere to trade. Nobody in that room is thinking about conquest. You wouldn't be either. You're thinking about your investment. About getting a ship home safely, full of pepper, before the Dutch beat you to it. That's the whole plan at the start: buy low in Asia, sell high in London. A business. Nothing more. Then the company does something almost no trading firm in history had done before. It asks for, and gets, its own army. Small at first. Guards for warehouses. Protection against pirates and rival traders. The irony nobody clocked at the time, the safety measure became the takeover weapon. Beat 1. The company sets up factories, fortified trading posts along the Indian coast. Madras, Bombay, Calcutta. One gets walls. Each one gets cannons. Imagine a local ruler watching English ships unload crates of muskets into a building that's supposed to be a warehouse for cloth. He assumes it's for defense. He's half right. Beat 2. The Mughal Empire, once the wealthiest power on earth, starts to crumble from the inside. Succession wars, weak rulers, regional governors breaking away. A vacuum opens up. And nature abhors a vacuum less than the East India Company does. Beat 3. In 1757, the company's private army, led by a former clerk turned military commander, defeats the ruler of Bengal at the Battle of Plassey. Not through brute force. Through bribery. Half the enemy's own generals had already been paid to stand down before the first shot. Win an empire with muskets alone. You win it with a signature on a secret contract. Beat 4. With Bengal in its pocket, the company doesn't just trade anymore. It collects taxes. It appoints officials. It runs courts. A company with shareholders, a stock price, a head office on a London side street is now the government of 20 million people. Try explaining that to your accountant. Beat 5. Profits explode. So does the death toll. Company tax policy strips Bengal's farmers bare right as a drought hits. Grain reserves the company could have released stay locked in warehouses, reserved for trade. What happens next isn't a plot twist. It's a body count. Back to that vote. That room in London. By 1773, the company is drowning not in failure, but in the sheer, obscene size of its success. It governs more people than Britain itself. The British government has to step in not to stop a business, but to bail one out. The private company had grown so large that its collapse threatened to take the nation down with it. Picture the moment in Parliament. A minister holds up the company's charter like it's evidence in a trial. We gave them a license to trade, he says, quiet, almost disbelieving. They built a kingdom. The vote passes. The government doesn't dissolve the company. It does something stranger, it takes partial control, while letting the company keep running the show on the ground. A trading firm. Governing India. With Parliament's blessing. That's the turn. That's the something became something else. A pepper business became a colonial government, and nobody in that original room, tapping maps and dreaming of warehouses, ever voted for that. The company would stagger on for another 80 years, but the writing was already on the wall. In 1857, Indian soldiers serving in the company's own army rebelled. A rebellion the company itself had helped provoke through decades of cultural disregard and economic extraction. The uprising was crushed, brutally. And the British government, embarrassed and alarmed, finally did what it should have done a century earlier. Abolished the company. Not gently, by Act of Parliament, stripping it of everything. India became a formal colony of the British Crown. The men who ran the company mostly walked away wealthy. People of Bengal buried an estimated 10 million dead from famines the company's policies had worsened. Here's the quiet, human image worth sitting with. In company ledgers from the Bengal famine years, clerks kept meticulous, tidy columns of profit right alongside notes on villages that had gone silent. The bookkeeping never missed a beat. The villages did. Here's why this still matters to you, right now, today. The East India Company was arguably the first modern multinational corporation, and it left behind the blueprint every huge company since has quietly studied. Limited shareholder liability, a stock price detached from human consequences, and a lobbying arm powerful enough to write its own laws. Think of it less like ancient history and more like a prototype. Same tension, the company created a private entity growing powerful enough to act like a government, while answering mainly to shareholders, is a conversation we're still having about tech giants, megabanks, and private military contractors today. And the one number worth remembering, out of all of it, at its peak, the East India Company's private army had roughly 260,000 soldiers, twice the size of the British Army itself. The company built that to sell pepper. If a business can quietly become a government once, it can happen again. Just watch for the warehouse with too many guns inside. Subscribe if you want more stories about the moments history almost missed.